Power better.
Let's go!
Alrighty, today we have Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean for the GameCube. A card-based JRPG, which I know is a turn-off for a lot of people, but I say give it a chance. The last game I played like this was the translated ROM of Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan Densetsu, and I enjoyed it a lot. But Baten Kaitos got put into my backlog, as sometimes happens in a game collector's life. But anyway, what better time to play than now that I get to share this 60+ hour game with you guys here on YouTube.
You after all. I'm surprised to see you alive.
Giacomo, you don't know how long I've waited for this moment.
We'll get into the game's story later. I want to talk about graphics first. Baten Kaitos ticks all the boxes that you would expect in an RPG. The fantasy world setting, as far as variety, is probably one of the most diverse I've ever seen. You start off in a very charming, typical village farming town, similar to Chrono Cross's Arnie Village. You venture off into forests which are full of green trees and blue streams, all bright and colorful. But it's more than just the typical stuff. There's multiple bustling cities around with their own visual theme, my favorite being Reverence, the picture book village, because it comes so out of place with its construction paper cutout picture book art style. It's a shame they didn't do more with this town. There aren't many sections to the picture book village, but that seems to be the theme I noticed throughout the game. I don't know if it's the GameCube's disk storage limitations or what, but it seems most towns, while diverse, sure, are only 3 to 4 screens max. It takes away some of that epic vibe a large game like Baten Kaitos should have. That's not to say you're going to feel underwhelmed at all with the locales and the worlds you get to visit. No. Baten Kaitos sports some of the most beautiful pre-rendered graphics you've ever seen since a Chrono Cross or a Final Fantasy IX. Home interiors are super detailed with no expense spared, full with all the amenities you would find in a Final Fantasy. And I love just looking around in the game, checking out bookshelves to see what I could find, seeing how these characters live, what kind of tools they use in their home, pots, pans, fire pits, just people sitting around talking. Exteriors are well animated. The city Percad has lush plant overgrowth on the architecture and clouds blowing by, since the city's located higher up in the sky. There's a city made of candy and sweets, for Pete's sake. I get hungry every time I'm in there. And of course, a fantasy world isn't complete without its Imperials, Emperors, and military sections, which Baten Kaitos has and makes look pretty. Battle environments transition well. I always found it interesting to see what the battle environment is going to look like compared to the dungeon that I'm in. The overworld is simple, but again, I'm pretty sure they sacrificed a huge overworld in favor of making more town and a longer story. But still, the overworld is nicely detailed but linear. You'll walk along a single path from town to town, and some people might enjoy this more as you go right into the next objective quicker, no lingering around the overworld. Graphically throughout the game, I was getting a deep Chrono Cross / PS1 vibe, and I loved it. Baten Kaitos graphically feels like an optimized PS1 JRPG, so if PS1 JRPGs were your thing, you'll feel right at home.
We can do this if we work together.
Alright, if you're gonna talk about Baten Kaitos, you have to get into the card-based fighting system. But don't let that scare you. If you're familiar with turn-based RPGs, then you'll be fine. At the start of the game, you'll get introduced to Magnus, in other words, cards that hold the essence of objects or magic. Each member of your party holds their own unique deck of cards that they take into battle with attacks, spells, items, and defense moves, equipped beforehand. There's no regular attack, defend, spell, or item selections. Instead, on the player's turn, you select from the randomly generated pool of cards on display from their deck. The player's turn is either going to be a defensive turn, in which the enemy attacks, or an offense turn, in which the player can attack, or buff, or heal. Sounds simple, but this is where RNG can really be either really good or really bad. For example, if on your defend turn, there are no defend type cards to choose from, you'll take the full damage with every hit. Each hit from an enemy requires a defensive card to reduce the amount of damage taken. You can choose to burn a card in hopes of a useful card popping up next, but that carries its own risk as you might be burning a useful card that you might be saving for the next turn. The same goes for when it's your offensive turn. If there are no attack cards, you might choose to heal, but what if you have nothing to heal? Do you burn the heal cards in hope of getting an attack card?
This'll help.
Right there! Take this! I'll finish you! Magic! Dance of light!
Pressure's high during the battle, even during small ones, because there's a timer that will end your turn if you can't decide. Also, not to forget, there's an elemental system at play here, as well as number values on each card that play a part. But let's start with the elemental system. You got wind and Chronos, light and dark, fire and water. A good tip is to scope out the dungeon you'll be in and build your character deck accordingly, according to like the weaknesses that the enemies have. You don't want to mix attacks like light and dark because they cancel each other out. You can end up doing 0 damage this way. I found it safer to not have any conflicting elements in a character deck to be sure that this never happens. So for example, don't carry wind and Chronos, just carry wind, and just take the risk during battle. It worked out for me, so I'm pretty sure it'll work out for you. Now at the end of your turn, which you can only attack one enemy at a time by the way, there's a summary screen detailing elements used and damage output, which I found weird at first because a summary screen is usually something you get at the end of a battle, but as I got used to it, it became useful. These summary screens is where you check up on your deck build, making sure that you're putting out optimal damage. It's also the only points in battles where you can gather your thoughts, as there's no timer in this end screen. Also, like I mentioned, you can only attack one enemy at a time. Let me tell you why that's important. On your offensive turn, you're going to have to decide if you want to heal a party member or attack the enemy. There is no switching mid-turn to heal. Once you go attack, it's only attack. And healing must be decided at the beginning, and also you can't switch to attack once you've chosen to heal. It sounds super complex at first, but in time you'll get used to it and it'll become second nature to you.
Here. This'll help.
Let's talk about those numbers on the cards that you've been seeing. The numerical numbers do not signify strength level. The Roman numerals do, but we'll get to that. Think of the numbers as a game of poker. Select a pair, straight, or even a full house and get bonus damage. Ask me how many times I was able to successfully choose a hand during an already high pressure situation. I would say I was successfully able to achieve a hand better than a pair less than 20 times in a 60+ hour playthrough. I honestly didn't concern myself with achieving certain hands. I didn't feel that the bonus damage was really worth it. I mean, but it's nice when they hit accidentally. The Roman numerals represent the level of that spell. Obviously, the higher the better. Choose your attacks wisely and build up a combo to unlock finisher spells. Powerful moves that cause big damage. Once you learn all the systems to combat, and you will over time, it becomes addicting, and for me, the most enjoyable part of Baten Kaitos. Winning battles is earned through the planning of building decks, familiarizing yourself with what cards do what, so you select them quickly during a battle. The random nature of the battles keeps you on your toes. It's not like a traditional RPG where you can rely on the same attack over and over. The game's story starts with the main character Callus waking up from an attack in the village Seborai. Callus communicates with you, the player, aka the Guardian Spirit.
Acting kind of funny. That reminds me. Doc Larry Kush was worried about amnesia. Like I'd hit my head or something. Don't tell me you've lost your memory. happened before that? Is that it? What? No way! You've got to be kidding me. What's going on here?
Callus decides to go and investigate the site of his attack and meets up with a girl named Shella. Together, they defeat the Lord of the Spring. Turns out, this world has shrines on each island protected by a boss or lord. The Lord protects an End Magnus. If all the End Magnus are obtained, then an evil entity Malpercio can be resurrected, and that would mean the total destruction of the world. Callus, who only wants to avenge the death of his grandfather and brother, gets pulled into preventing the evil scheme by the Empire of resurrecting Malpercio. Tons and twists and turns, as well as additional characters joining your party, and we get down to what's really going on. The story is immersive from start to finish, and you really feel the end of the world is at stake. All the characters' stories get fleshed out nicely, no thanks to the laughable voice acting.
What are you doing here, man? You're trespassing on my turf. Palolo III, Master of Shadows.
Perfect timing. I've been looking for you.
Really? Do you want to be one of my henchmen?
I turned voice acting off, but eventually turned them back on because I felt like I was missing out on something. Voiceover aside, Baten Kaitos' music has got some catchy tunes. At first, it's hit after hit, but then they start repeating and then they go back to the original pieces. So I don't know what went on there. I look forward to new tunes every city or dungeon. It's a shame, but nothing that will destroy your enjoyment, as the music is fitting and atmospheric. So that about covers it. I didn't want to spoil anything story-wise for anyone, so I kept it basic. My final thoughts on the game: I definitely am glad that I picked it up and waited this long to play it. This way I can share it with you guys on YouTube. For a card-based JRPG, Baten Kaitos delivers not only in its combat, but in its story and graphics as well, making for a truly unique game experience worthy of its cult following. Thank you so much everyone for watching my review. If you enjoyed this review, I got another JRPG review of Final Fantasy Type 0 HD on PS4. Definitely check that out if you're into JRPGs. I got more reviews on the way. Check out my channel. Make sure to subscribe. Stay tuned. We're growing slowly but surely, and I'll see you on the next one.